In this video, we're going to take Bello and turn it into a dirty STAX bandit, with a deck coming in at around 40 USD. Welcome to Element Hobbies, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. Now let's talk about Bello, Bard of the Brambles. Bello is a 3/3 Gruul commander with a mana value of 3. It's a raccoon bard with a powerful ability. During your turn, each non-equipment artifact and non-aura enchantment you control with a mana value of 4 or greater is a 4/4 elemental creature, in addition to its other types, and it has indestructible, haste, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. One thing to note with Bello is that this actually works on creatures, which is kind of weird that it can turn artifact creatures into artifact creatures. Now that can be used to your advantage by having 4 mana artifact creatures that have let's say subpar stats, but a good effect. I'm thinking of something like Solemn Simulacrum. That comes to mind as an artifact creature that fits the situation where the ability is pretty good, but then you're just stuck with a 2/2. However, this deck will actually be creatureless. When I first saw Bello, I immediately began to think about stacks, but more like control-y stacks, not prevent other players from playing the game at all stacks. The plan is to essentially use 4 mana value artifacts and enchantments to slow the game down, wipe the board, and then cast Bello to turn all your passive control into vicious walking pieces of trash that your commander found in a dumpster. So without further ado, I present trash stacks, broken into sections with alternatives to either up the budget of the deck or provide a spicy alternative. I'll provide the full deck list and alternatives in the description below, where you can also find links to my Patreon and affiliate links where you can support the channel. It should be noted that this list and video was produced before the full Bloomburrow set and Commander Precons were released, so there may be some upcoming additions that were omitted here. We'll start off with stacks, but not overly oppressive stacks. We aren't necessarily looking to lock people out of the game or anything, we mostly just want to slow the game down and keep opponents on their heels. We'll start with Barbed Foliage and Aether Sting, both anti-creature cards that will either deal damage to opponents or slow down token decks or just weenie decks. Oh, it also counters the uber popular flanking commander decks. Mirror of Life Trapping and Portcullis will both slow down the flow of creatures onto the field. Be careful with Portcullis, you can get into a situation where you may need to cast Bello, but there are already 2 creatures in play. Now you do run plenty of artifact removal, which we'll get to later, so if you are relying on Portcullis to slow the table down, make sure to have a way to remove it when you want to open the floodgates to either get your commander into play, or get all the delayed creatures into play for a board wipe. Godpharaoh's statue will delay creatures by upping their casting cost, and False Floor will reduce some of the effectiveness of creatures. It also has a built-in potential wipe, which I'm not sure how effective it's going to be, but I think it's pretty good. Witchbane Orb, Orbs of Warding, and Cosmos Elixir all work to give your force field some extra juice, providing hexproof, some damage prevention, some life gain, and, as a reminder, it's not super bad if they don't necessarily do anything when they're in play. These are all there to magically turn into trash automatons with Bello. Dingus Staff and Dingus Egg are there to deal with all the dinguses you'll play against. But seriously, the staff will limit what token decks can realistically put out there before the threat of a wipe will just destroy them. And the egg will prevent people from using a bunch of fetch lands or utility lands that sacrifice themselves. Icy Manipulator and Decimator Web will just kind of sit on the field and cause havoc on a lot of things. These don't have a particular use, but they're both pretty versatile. Leyline of Combustion will make it less appealing for players to target your stuff, and Isolation Cell will make it less appealing to cast a bunch of creatures. Mirrorworks can give you copies of many of the cards in the deck, and Curse Rack is kind of my own personal choice. You'll generally want to target a player that's drawing a bunch of cards, which happens all the time in Commander. The updated text on this actually reads, as Curse Rack enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. The chosen player's maximum hand size is 4. Given how these kinds of effects work, if someone has a Reliquary Tower in play, you can Curse Rack them to overwrite the Reliquary effect. But if you Curse Rack someone and then they play the Reliquary Tower, the tower will overwrite the rack. These last 2 are probably the meanest that I would run. Burning Earth will punish non-basics, and Anzaran Ruins will punish creature types. Now use your common sense before deciding to run these. If your meta is full of multicolored decks with lots of non-basics, maybe don't run Burning Earth. And if you have a lot of Kindred type decks in your meta, maybe don't run Anzaran Ruins. I do actually think Anzaran Ruins in general is fine, as you can generally lock down a few creatures just by happenstance. Now if those 2 don't seem up your alley or you want to splurge a bit, I've got a lot of alternatives you can try, and we'll go over a few of them here. Urza's Armor will save you some life per source of damage, but at 6 mana, it's not that great. Teferi's Puzzle Box can disrupt certain decks who try to sculpt a hand or maybe work with bouncing cards like Chulane. I like the idea of running Arborea where the game can become like a standstill but giving you ample time to set up. However, make sure to be careful with this as well because not everyone likes super long games. Since you don't really run any creatures that can block, Bedlam seems like an interesting choice. Yes, when you do cast Bello with this out, you'll be able to attack unimpeded. But with it just on the field, I wonder if this will encourage people to attack players with creatures or just attack you. Now, if you really hate blue players, you can run both Curse of Merit Lage and or Monsoon, which will frick over islands to some degree or another. Perhaps the most crucial alternative you could run is Melting, which will once and for all put those smarmy snow decks in their place. And that place is the trash can. We run a package of cards that don't necessarily stax your opponent, but they can and are mostly there to either cause aggressive chaos or enhance our magical pieces when they come to life. Gruul Warplow will give everything you got trample, and can turn into a creature in a pinch if you need it for an emergency block or something. Gimli's Reckless Might will give you a free fight when you finally decide to attack. The haste it gives is somewhat redundant considering Bello's abilities, though it will work with some of our other cards. Berserker's Onslaught will give all animated enchantments and artifacts double strike in addition to the bonuses they get from Bello, and Raised by Giants will let Bello be cast and be a bit tougher to take down, as well as turning Bello into a threat itself. Natural Growth will berserk all your animations, and you really only need something like this and one other STAX piece to make just a few STAX pieces lethal. However, we do run some creature generation cards that can benefit from cards like Unnatural Growth. I run the trifecta of Sandworm Convergence, Rite of the Rainstorm, and Paradox Zone. Convergence will do a bit of stacks while making 5/5s, Paradox Zone will start pumping out exponentially large creatures, and Rite of the Raging Storm will just inject the table with a lot of chaos. The idea is that while the table is dealing with all those lightning ragers, you can more easily set up your kill. Rounding out the A-stacks is Soldevi Simulacrum. I know, hear me out though. With Bello and some of these A-stacks pieces that give trample and whatever, your creatures will also get indestructible and have haste and trample, doubling power and whatever, right? So what if this guy just comes out and is like a mana dump that has haste, trample, double strike, and can deal like 30 damage with all your extra mana? Street Riot is a good alternative to, say, Gimli's Reckless Might, since Gimli also gives haste, which is kind of redundant to Bello. Gratuitous Violence is another damage multiplier. In fact, most any red damage multiplier would work here. Thunderhawk Gunship gives all your attacking creatures flying, which is the one offensive trait that this deck kind of really lacks. If you want to be ultra spicy, try out Risky Move. You run no creatures, so you don't have a ton to lose here, but I can see this thing causing a good amount of chaos, and that's fun to me. We start with Hull Breach and Decimate, which are some of Gruul's most efficient targeted removal. Nature's Claim is one of the better disenchants in the game, and for some reason I just never use it that often. This seems like a fine spot for it, as well as the new-ish Collective Resistance, which has super versatility, which means I super love it. Chaos Warp is another super versatile card, and random and wacky enough that I won't feel bad when whatever it gets from my opponent ends up killing me. Lignify is a great creature nullifier that will work with some of your enchantment synergies, and if you want to be kind of a prick, you can slap this on your opponent's commander. If you're already playing this deck, you're already walking the path to being kind of a prick, so you may as well embrace it. Cortivire is primarily there to pick off small creatures. It is possible to maintain the monarchy with it, but you really need to plan ahead for that. We wrap up the interactions with a new personal favorite of mine, which is Territory Forge, which has definitely proven its usefulness to me so far. It's also kind of reminding me of the card Fissure, which was one of my favorite cards from the era of Magic us boomers like to pine over. Beast Within is another hyper-usable card. You probably want to run this, but it's just a bit too expensive for the $40 deck limit. In fact, most of these are just a bit too expensive to use as interaction. I would prefer my budget to go with a more splashier card. The Mightstone and the Weakstone can be solid removal with some card draw, and can hang around until you need to animate it. Lux Cannon is a slow but repeating Vindicate. If your meta is a bit slow and battlecruisery, this gets better. If it's kinda fast, maybe skip this. Epic Struggle isn't really an interaction card, but I did have a wild urge to run this purely as a decoy. When you play it, the table will notice, which means that some of your other actual win conditions might survive a little bit longer. As usual, I think this might be me just being a little bit too clever and enjoying giving myself challenges. But feel free to let me know if you think this could actually be useful. The best ramp costs money, so we have to make do with just good ramp, including the very underrated Edge of Autumn, which will get you a ramp when you need it, and a card when you don't. Rampant Growth literally has ramp in the name. They named a card after one of my sections. What a world. The last of the 2-mana ramp is Glimpse the Core, which is 100% a budget choice, and Gruul's Signet, which is just good. We then run a trio of 4 mana value artifact ramp in Stone Speaker Crystal, Thran Dynamo, and Hedron Archive. Normally 4 mana value ramps are kind of mid unless you're digging lands out of your deck with them, but these also have the added bonus of getting animated with your commander. The last of the ramp are a trifecta of enchantments: Fire of Invention, Frontier Siege, and Glorious Sunrise. Now be careful with Fire of Invention, there will probably be times where you want to cast more than 2 spells, so just keep that in mind when you put this into the battlefield. If you've already got these in your budget or want to up the budget, you can always add the good 2 mana value Seeking ramps. Stuff like 3 Visits, Farseek, Nature's Lore. Sticking more with the theme of the deck, Bootlegger Stash will generate treasure tokens, while sticking around waiting to be animated like the broom from that very stingent intellectual property company movie. Omen Path Journey will also just kind of hang out while getting you random lands. You'll generally want to get your utility lands with this, but you can also just get regular mana and get a ramp each turn. Overlaid Terrain is something I really wanted to try, but it's only really good in the early part of the game. Also, the name reminds me of my patrons who are getting laid way too much. If you too would like to be overly laid, join the Patreon or sign up for a YouTube membership. They both have basically all the same perks, like having your name in my videos, such as here. The link to both of those will be in the description below. Our sculpting is entirely red and green enchantments. Into the Wilds, Case of the Locked Hothouse, and Abundance will both let you manipulate the top of your library in your draws. Eidolon of Blossoms is a staple Enchantress card drawer, and it fits the 4 mana value for our animation shenanigans. Garruk's Uprising doesn't fit into our animation plans, but if you have Bello in play, this will get you into card, and when you cast a new enchantment or artifact with a mana value of 4 while Bello's out, you will get a card. Outpost Siege and Stolen Strategy will both let you get free cast from exile cards, just solid card advantage. Experimental Frenzy can get really out of hand really quickly, so you do have to manage it a bit. Weird, a card choice for me that requires thought instead of just being flat out good. Who'd have thunk? We finish off the section with Vance's Blasting Cannon, which is more cast from exile triggers. I don't think you'll ever really cast 3 spells a turn with this, so you just won't use its backside, but just in case, this is what it looks like. There are a lot of good sculpting that you could run in this deck, and if you want to triple the cost of the deck almost immediately, you can put in what is maybe the best sculpting card of all time, which is of course the One Ring, which is a really ironic name since it's goddamned everywhere. I'm going to butcher this card's name, but Chimmel the Inner Sun is really good for this deck, giving us protection as well as a free card each turn. Not just to draw, but also to put into play. Mind's Eye is another terrific option if you don't mind going over budget a little bit. Continuing with my harebrained ideas, there was a version of this deck that would use Defense of the Heart to bring out a combo win type piece, which was ultimately shut down. However, if you do decide to go with more creatures in your strategy, this will help you get 2 key pieces. We'll start with Navendral's Disc and Boom Pile, both of which will blow up mostly everything. If you can, try to use these while Bello is in play, since Bello will give everything you have indestructible. Yes, Bello will die, but its protection will protect everything else. Heaven, Hell, and Earthquake are a few X-spell wipes, with Earthquake having the added bonus of potentially being a finisher. Brotherhood's End and Chain Reaction are a few more creature wipes, leveraging our no creatures most of the time advantage. Brotherhood's End will also destroy artifacts that are generally smaller than what you care about. Antrag's Rampage will clear out all artifacts but your own. You won't really get anything from the other ability, but 5 mana for a Shadowstorm that doesn't hit you is probably worth it. Fraying Line is not technically a wipe, but man, it does seem fun. I just love the idea of paying into this and then getting attacked with it and then having it be, it just seems like a lot of mess. Blasphemous Act is a really good card, and it only didn't make the deck because of budget concerns, but these are printed in like every Commander precon, so you might just have one lying around. I would feel free to put this in. Pyrohemia is really good with your lack of creatures, but it does price out for about $10, which is just wild. Calming Verse is a one-sided tranquility, but you have to make sure that you are tapped out for it, which could leave you vulnerable to interaction on your opponent's turns the rest of the round. There was also a version of the deck that ran Obliterate and Yokel Hops as finishers. The catch was that you would need to have enough mana to have Bello in play to protect your stuff, cast the giant destroy spell, then recast your commander to get this stuff reanimated, and that seemed a bit convoluted. Dust Bowl continues to be the MVP of 2024, which is especially nice since that cowboy version from Outlaws of Thunder Junction is so cheap. Also, don't be a jerk with it. Dust Bowl responsibly. Demolition Field is another land destruction, but a bit more fair. And Bonder's Enclave can get you a card if you have Bello out, since all your enchantments and artifacts are 4 power. I run 8 gruel producing lands, and I always say run the best that you got or what will fit your budget. I finished the deck off with 13 mountains and 12 forests. The biggest weakness of the deck is the lack of creatures, which is kind of also its greatest strength. And Gruul really isn't a great pillow fort color combo. However, I think you do have enough STAX E type things to compete, and there are lots of options in Gruul if you want to up the stackiness and up the meanness. If you do like control decks but maybe Gruul isn't your jam, check out the Safara God of the Pulse deck, which is more akin to a classic blue-white control deck. Thank you for watching Element Hobbies, and a special thank you to everyone who joined the Patreon or helped out here on YouTube. The support there makes these videos happen. I really appreciate it. So everyone just enjoy Bloomburrow, and I will see you around.